Thank you very much, Speaker. It's an honour for me to rise on behalf of the Progressive Conservative Caucus this morning to pay tribute to Leonard Joseph Quilty, who served in this House as the member for Renfrew South from January 18, 1962 to the general election September 25, 1963. Len Quilty was born in Shamrock, a little hamlet in my county of Renfrew, on March 27, 1920. He was raised on the same farm that his parents Michael and Margaret lived on all their lives. A highly respected farmer on an inhospitable piece of land. I want you people to know that the land up in that part of Renfrew County is not like the flatlands of southwestern Ontario. They don't call it Mount St. Patrick because it's flat. It's a really tough place to farm, but the Quilty family was there for the three generations now, because Len's sons, Pat and Mike, have homes on that property today. He was able to make a living on that farm, meager though it may be, because of his commitment and his work ethic. And that really paid dividends for Len in his community and his involvement in his community as well. In addition to farming, he served his community in many, many ways. In fact, he was the secretary of the Renfrew Shamrock Telephone Company. Now, that wasn't a really big one, and eventually it was swallowed up by Bell. And as Bill McAdams said in delivering the eulogy to Len, one of the eulogies to Len at the service after his passing, he said it was a very small swallow. And yes, it was. But Len also went on to serve as a tax collector for the township of Admiston and a trustee for that famous one-room schoolhouse in Shamrock, and further as a trustee for the Renfrew County Separate School Board. Len had 5 priorities in life: family, church, farming, baseball, and politics. His family is represented, as the Speaker has introduced him today, by his son Pat, his granddaughter Jennifer, and her spouse Jeff Davis, Madeline Davis, and Amelia Davis, who are the great-granddaughters of Len Quilty. His community service in so many ways, and the respect he had among his farming brethren as well. He was one of these people who they went to for advice on farming matters and also business matters. But it led to his interest in politics. Well, he always had the interest in politics, but that interest was really cultivated more. He became a devout, lifelong member of the Liberal Party, a staunch Liberal. I knew I had to get some applause from the other side. I knew that would do it. And in 1959, he was the Liberal nominee in an election against the mighty Jimmy Maloney, who was a legend in the Ottawa Valley. And Len lost that election in 1959. Not surprisingly, it was a very popular old man Ontario, Leslie Frost, a very popular premier of the province, and Jimmy Maloney, a legend himself. He lost that election, but it gave him the toehold that was necessary, because after the passing of Jimmy Maloney on September the 30th, 1961, a by-election was called. January 18th, 1962, against the Conservative standard-bearer Con Mulvihill, a lawyer from Arnprior, Len eked out a very tight victory, 144 votes. A landslide. Maybe that's where the term landslide Len came. We thought it was Hopkins. But I want to tell you about that by-election. 1962, people in rural Ontario have always taken their politics seriously and still do. But January 18th, 1962, you know, some people think, well, a by-election, it's not going to be a big turnout, and whoever wins, it's kind of really a default thing. Well, the voter turnout in that by-election was greater than the general election of 1959 and greater than the following general election of 1963. So when Len Quilty was elected in a by-election in 1962, everybody in Renfrew South that wanted to vote got out and voted, and they chose him as their representative here in Queen's Park. Now, when Len got here, he brought with him that commitment, that same commitment that he had for farming and community service. He brought it here to stand for the people of Renfrew South. And one of the things he challenged the government of the day on was, and man, do things never change, challenge the government of the day on bridging that gap between urban and rural Ontario. So I say to the government, was Len Quilty a politician or a prophet? Because some things just haven't changed. In fact, in his inaugural speech, Len Quilty talked about the necessity to extend Highway 417 for economic and safety reasons through Renfrew County. That was 1962. He talked about, let's get Highway 417, a 4-lane highway through Renfrew County. And I say to the Minister of Transportation, who wouldn't yet have been born in 1962, if you're not going to do it for me, do it for Len. In the 1963 general election, Len Quilty, as the incumbent, was challenged by, yes, you guessed it, my father, Paul Yakabuski. And my dad defeated Len in that election in another tight race. And you know, my dad always recognized that timing is everything in politics. And he was fortunate to be a candidate for then an also very popular Ontario Premier in John Robarts. Had the roles been switched, things could have been different. We all recognize that politics sometimes is you're on the winning team is always a benefit for that candidate as well. They faced off 2 more times in 1967 and 1971, at which time Len decided, I'm going back to the farm. But he never got out of politics, and I'll touch on that a little later. Well, actually, I'll touch on it right now. In 1977, he was elected as the Reeve of Admiston Township, his beloved Admiston Township. And he became the warden of Renfrew County in 1981. And I remember having a conversation with my dad, yes, Premier, at the kitchen table. And he told me how Len Quilty transformed the role of warden in Renfrew County. And this was his political opponent, but this never was personal. They were political adversaries, thank you very much, but it wasn't personal. And he recognized, don't forget, my dad was the MPP at the time that Leonard was the warden of Renfrew County, and he talked about how Leonard transformed the role of warden in Renfrew County. With all due respects to those who came before him, it was a large part, in a large part, a ceremonial role. But Len, because of his confidence, his political experience, and the fact that he had sat here and understood how this place worked, he transformed that role into one where the warden actually mattered. And provincial politicians, when Len Quilty wanted to see them, they saw him. And people in the cabinet and at the cabinet level, they understood that Renfrew County was important and the warden needed to be listened to. And that's how Len transformed that role. And since then, it has been forever changed. When I first got involved in politics, I made a point of visiting Len during the campaigns and having a little chat with him. And I learned much. And he was always very, very kind to me. I'd met him many times at different places, usually funerals, over the intervening years. But he was very, very kind to me during those visits. You know, in Len's earlier life, as I said, his priorities, he was an avid baseball player, a pitcher for the Douglas baseball team. He loved baseball, and after he quit pitching, he became an umpire. I don't know whether the other players liked him as much as an umpire as they did as a pitcher, but he was a very good pitcher. And the last time I saw Len Quilty was at the St. Patrick's celebration at the DACA Centre in 2012. And I was just coming in, and it was a beautiful, beautiful day, sunny, warm. It was March, but it was just gorgeous. And Mike was wheeling Len out in his wheelchair, and Len was having, the challenges of age and dementia at this time, and Mike had said to me later that it wasn't a great day. He didn't seem to recognize anybody, but he wanted to be there for the music and the celebration. And as I'm walking into the DACA Centre, Len is coming out, and he looks up and he says, "John Yakabuski, how the heck are you?" So whatever it is, I don't know what effect I had, but I made that day a little better, but it sure made my day better too. And I'm glad I have that memory of Len as our last meeting. And fittingly, that Douglas baseball jacket adorned Len's casket at the public viewing at Goulet Funeral Home. The funeral service on May the 20th, 2014, right in the middle of the provincial election campaign, when I drove to the funeral, I was feeling terribly because somebody had done their job on my campaign team. They had campaign signs all the way the road to St. Patrick's Church. My brother and I were picking them up because we didn't think they should be stuck there during Len Quilty's funeral service. But we managed to get them up. It was a wonderful funeral, a wonderful tribute to Len, to be laid to rest at the same church at which he was baptized some 94 years before. You know, I talked about his family. I haven't mentioned, I apologize, I should have, his wonderful, devoted, beloved wife Irene, who passed years before him. They raised a wonderful family. And I remember Father Rick Starks talking that perhaps Len would have the last joke because the doors were open for the church for people to come in long before the service, and the place was full of mosquitoes. And Father Rick Starks made a comment. He said, Len would just love this, because you might not remember what Father Rick Stark's sermon said that day, but you're never going to forget this funeral because you spent half the time slapping mosquitoes, half the time waving at them. So Len had the last laugh at his funeral. You know, it was his church. So to paraphrase St. Paul, Len Quilty, he fought the good fight, he finished the race, and he kept the faith. And we're all better off for having known him. Thank you very much.